to Beast TV. What was that? You better get a fresh dip and buckle up. Welcome to Beast TV's 100th podcast. Larry, can you ever believe that we would have done 100 of these?
No, I would not have believed it.
I can't either. We are premiering this podcast because our guest will be boogering on Thursday night. So, but it was important for us to have a guest that we respect, that is a good friend of ours. And so we want to welcome everybody to the podcast. And Larry, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest?
Well, I will, but I want to say the secret to us having 100 episodes is not me and you. It's always our guest. Because if it was up to us, there probably wouldn't have been 100.
That's very true. That's real true. And, you know, the whole purpose of us, the reason why Larry approached me about doing these podcasts, that it is not about us. It's about bringing on a guest that can share what they are doing out in the fields, and so that others might be able to learn from them and incorporate into their own strategies and tactics. And because we feel like this community really needs that, and to be able to share and help each other out. So with that said, introduce our guest. Let's bring him on here.
Definitely. And for our 100th episode, we have a very special guest. Everybody knows him, loves him. He's got some great stories, and we can't wait to hear what he's been up to. Our guest tonight is Tim Coonbo Baker. Hello, Coonbo.
Hey, Coonbo. We are tickled that you have agreed to come on and share your experiences. I talk to people all the time that just go back and listen to those old podcasts and talk about the things that they've learned and how it's helped them. And so we just want to thank you for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you guys asked me. I'm glad to get to do this. And I know it was great seeing you guys back in April at LBL, and we had a good time then. And looking forward to, spending more time in the boonies, out there chasing those squatch with y'all. Yeah. I'm honored to be here.
Well, most of the podcast, I always ask for the guests to introduce themselves, and there's no reason to ask you to introduce yourself. But before you get started, I just have a question, and it's, at what age did you realize that these creatures were in the woods? And just tell us a little bit about when you discovered that they were there.
Well, a lot of people may not believe this, but it's a fact. It happened. And I grew up on a farm in northwest Alabama, and when I was 3 years old, we had an incident happen where one came up by my grandparents' house, and uh, we lived across out in the middle of a 40-acre field that was south of their house. So so we had to cross 20 acres plus about another 100 yards. So they were their place was 300 probably 350 yards north of us. But we were over there one night playing outside, and I can remember hearing something screaming down in the lane north of the house. And of course, it sort of scared us kids. What's that? What's that? And my grandfather says, "Well, oh, that's just that old catamount. Don't worry about it. It's not going to come up here." And a little while later, we heard it screaming again, and it was closer. Well, about that time, my grandmother and there were two other houses there close to my grandparents' house where folks that worked on the farm there lived. And so my grandmother came out and got me, and the other two mothers, they came out and got their kids and got us all in the house. And in just a minute, my mom came over and got me, took me home. But this is a story I've told a bunch of times, but ended up later on that night, that booger came up there, and they had 7 coonhounds. These are rough old dogs. They're plot hounds and black and tans, and might have been a Catahoula or two. I can't remember. Stayed there at one of the houses. And when that thing came up and started messing around with the gate that came in there between my grandparents' house and one of the other houses, those dogs bailed off the porch and hauled butt over there. And this horrendous fight ensued. And I can remember there being able to hear the fight clearly, and ended up killing 6 out of the 7 dogs. And my grandfather, I remember could hear him come out shooting his rifle, shooting his 30-30, and learned later on he wasn't shooting at it. He was shooting over it and up in the air, trying to scare it off. But it scared one of the families so bad that during the night they packed up and left, never to return again. But I can remember, won't know what was a catamount. My grandfather telling me, he said, "Well, it's just like a cross between a big gorilla and maybe a bear or something." Which, for 1957, that's a good description. Or 57, 58. That's a good description. And I asked my dad, what was a catamount, and he told me, he said, "Well, it was sort of like a cross between a bear and a gorilla, and maybe with some kind of a big black panther mixed in or something." And which, again, that's pretty good, because he knew they climbed trees, and that's pretty good description of them for that time, because the word Bigfoot hadn't even been invented at that point, and Sasquatch had never been heard of in North Alabama, and we hadn't even heard of the Yetis or Abominable Snowman or anything by that time. And I can see in the monitor here that you can see all the junk behind me. I retired back in October, and we have since moved from northern Missouri back to Alabama, and I'm not all the way unpacked yet. As you can see, I got crap stacked everywhere. But
you hadn't had time to unpack. You've been boogering everywhere.
That's about right. But anyway, but then when I was 4 years old, I saw one outside my bedroom window. I hadn't been in bed very long, and I was still awake, and I heard gravel crunching outside, and we had about 4 feet of gravel all the way around the house, because our house didn't have gutters on it, and if you didn't have that gravel down there, the water that would run off the roof would hit the ground and splash that old red clay mud up on the side of the house, and my mom didn't like that, so my dad had put that gravel all around the house, and I heard something crunching on the gravel. And I was sleeping on the top bunk then, and we had those old crank out casement windows. We didn't have air conditioning in the house then, and I got up and I was 4 years old, but I knew how to unclip the clips at the bottom of the screen, and I could lift them up, and I could the window was already open, and I could lean out and look outside, and that's what I did. I looked out and I looked this way and didn't see anything. I looked down first and didn't see anything. I looked this way, didn't see anything. I looked this way, and there's one standing there, except it was backed up against the side of the house. Had his back up against the house, and it had his head turned looking towards me, and it was sort of looking towards me, and I don't know what I did, but I know it scared the crap out of me, and it looks at it and it goes like that. And I don't know if that's its attempt to smile at me or if it was trying to threaten me. It didn't make a single sound.
Yeah.
And all I know is that when it did that, I came flying off the top of that bunk bed, and I go screaming into my parents' room, which they were in the room next to me, and I go, Mama, Daddy, there's a yellow-eyed, bloody-headed monster outside my window. And the deal was, the moon was up. It was a clear night, and the moon was up, and the moon was at such an angle that it was reflecting in his eyes, and his eyes were not glowing red. They were reflecting yellow back at me. And the thing had reddish hair. And that's one thing about the boogers that are out on our farm, because our farm's on the river. They all, every one of them I've ever seen looks like it just came from the beauty shop. Its hair on all of them are just shiny, and the light glints off of them, and that's the way that moonlight was glinting off that red hair. And to me, a 4-year-old kid, it looked like it had blood in its hair, and that's what I call a yellow-eyed, bloody-headed monster. And the weird thing was, I wouldn't say it was weird, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. But my dad never hesitated. He never said a word. He didn't try to tell me that, no, you didn't see nothing like that. My dad came flying out of the bed, and he always kept his old house slippers right there, and he jumped in those house slippers like a fireman jumping in his boots, and he grabbed the old Brown and A5 shotgun that he kept behind the bedroom door, loaded up with buckshot. He grabbed that, and we had one of those big old, about a 4 or 5 D cell old chrome ever-ready flashlight that he kept sitting on the bedside table. And he grabbed a shotgun in one hand, that big old ever-ready flashlight in the other. He goes hauling butt out the door with that in his hand, in his boxer shorts. And he told my mom, he said, get the kids and get them and lock yourself in the bathroom. And so my mom, she told me to go get in the bathroom, and my sister was just an infant then. She was only like a year and a half old or something like that. I wouldn't say that was an infant, but she grabbed her. We went to the bathroom. She closed the door and locked it, and she put us up in the corner of the bathroom, and she sat down in front of us, and she had her 38 like that resting on her knees, pointed at the door. And we always, my mom and dad slept with a gun under their pillows all the time. And when we turned 6 years old, we were taught to shoot a .22 rifle, and we were given a .22 when we were about 7 to keep in our rooms. And then when we got up teenagers, we were, I was given a 9mm automatic, and and of course I'd already knew how to use it, but kept it in my room and kept it handy, in case we had to have it. And but that's just the way I was raised. But anyway, my dad was gone for about 10 minutes or so, and we heard him out the far end of the house. Dot, it's me, don't shoot, it's me. And she said, okay. And we heard him come down the hall, and we hear him out. He wasn't right in front of that bedroom door. He was off to the side. You could tell. He said, it's me. I said, you can unlock the door now. Everything's okay. And she said, okay. And she goes up there and she unlocks that door and eases it open. And now I realize, because of things I've learned, I believe that they had heard those things mimicking them, mimicking human talk and everything, is what I believe. But, and my mom says, did you see it? And Dad said, No, I heard it, but I heard it run off up towards the shack. And my both my grandfathers in there, when they had a chance to, they built houses, and they had this old building. It was they called it the shack, that sat on a lowboy trailer that they kept up in the northeast corner of that 40-acre field, up under some trees that we lived in the middle of, and it took off and it ran towards the shack there, the old construction shack. This is before they had construction trailers that they would pull out onto a job site, when a house or building was being built. They would pull that, especially if they were building subdivisions. They would they'd pull that thing out and leave it out there where they were building several houses, and that was predecessor of a work trailer. But what's weird is, to this day, that is still a travel route right through there where they used to keep the old shack sitting. But then my grandmother, she would, when she'd plant her garden, she would plant her garden, and then we would go, and later on, she would send me to do it. We'd go back towards the back of the farm, back over next to the woods, and we would plant other stuff, cantaloupes and watermelons and muskmelons and squash and snap beans and spring peas and just all kind of different things for the neighbors. Well, what? Nobody lives back here. And she said, yeah, they do. Said, we're planting this for the neighbors, so if they want something, they can take this right there and they'll leave our stuff alone.
Yeah.
And my great grandparents used to do the same thing. And but I learned later on the neighbors were the buggers that lived back there, which that's what some of the folks there where I grew up, they called them boogers, and some of them called them haints, and some of them, my parents and my grandparents called them catamounts, and then some of them called them no heads. As a matter of fact, there's a hollow that comes down onto our farm called No Head Hollow. You can look it up on topo map. And the funny thing is, if you follow No Head Hollow out to the southeast and just keep going, once the hollow plays out over a low ridge, follow over that, still going southeast, going down towards the Town Creek bottoms, and you go through Booger Bottoms, and it's on the topo maps to this day. And you can look at topo maps all the way back in the 1800s, and those names are on them. So yeah, that area's got a long history of booger sightings. But anyway, Coonbo, that's sort of how I got started. But I didn't. Go ahead.
I was going to say, most people know your stories of how you developed calls and stuff, growing up with them, hearing them, and mimicking them.
Yep.
And you develop what worked, what didn't work. But you come up with a new technique recently. Won't you tell us about that new technique that you come up with?
All right. There's another researcher out there, fellow researcher, name is Mark Maychek. And Mark and I have known each other since back in the very early 2000s. And back, I don't know, probably about 8-9 years ago, Mark and I talk a lot, and back and forth with each other. And he got to tell me about some reading and studying that he'd been doing, and how that he thought that these things were related to the Nephilim. And he asked me if I knew what Nephilim was. I said, well, yeah, because, I've gone to church my whole life, and I've read the Bible a bunch. I've even taken some Bible classes in college. And I said, yeah, I know about them. And Mark's very, very highly educated, very smart guy. And he pointed out some scripture to me, and we also both have copies of some of the non-canonical books of the Bible, and so he made some references over to some of these stuff, and got me to read them, and it was about how the Nephilim, that they have to respond to the voice of God. They have no choice but to respond to the voice of God. And Mark was the first person that I ever heard of that was getting sort of turned on to the idea of these, or had originated the idea of that there's a possibility that these Bigfoot could be tied to Nephilim, and or they're descendants of Nephilim. And Mark said, if this is true, and we could figure out, how to call down or call upon the voice of God, we could make these things respond to us. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? You're going to get down on your knees and pray to God to call the boogers to you. And anyway, so we got on talking about this. And finally one day I told him, I said, Mark, what are you going to do? You going to go to your preacher and tell him you're going to take him out in the woods with us and ask him to pray up the boogers, He said, no. He said, you're not getting it. What? He said, you need to study what the voice of God really is. Well, I had studied Greek and stuff like that in the past, and I knew that there were, a lot of connections. There's some really ancient Greek that was, pre-Christian era, and I know there's, a lot of Hebrew texts out there that can be interpreted different ways. So I started studying some of this stuff, and I finally figured out, and this is after I had to go talk to some people, and I talked to some Jewish scholars. Like I said, I've studied Greek and such, and I know a little bit. I don't speak it or anything like that, but I can, you give me time and I can pick through and read it and pretty much figure out what it says. But I began to realize that a lot of these references to the voice of God are not talking about God's things that God says, but the voice of God is an object. It is their name or whatever for a particular object. So I came back to Mark and I sort of ran this by him, and he's like, but dang, you're right. That's you're right. You're figuring it out. And I said, yeah. Well, that got me turned on. So I was in it with Mark trying to learn more about this stuff. Well, we spent several years talking to different people and experts and scholars. Just so happens our priest was a very, very astute biblical scholar, and had a lot of training in Old Testament studies and Old Testament literature and such, and also was very interested in these other old non-canonical texts that were not part of the regular Bible. So, and I talked to her about some of that stuff, and she sort of looked at me and, why are you asking about this kind of stuff? What's your interest in this? So I just sort of shelled down a corn with her and told her, I said, that what we were thinking about, that about these Nephilim possibly being connected to Sasquatch. Well, she sort of looked at me and she, let me think about that. Well, she got to thinking about it. She said, well, some of the descriptions of the Nephilim and some of these other things that were in the Bible, she said, there may be some kind of a connection or something. So anyway, hang on just a minute. Jake, you got a squeaky toy? What you got over there, boy? Okay, you can play with that. I was afraid my dog had one of his squeaky toys and was going to mess everything up. But anyway, eventually we figured out. Actually, Mark was the one that he just dropped his toy and it rolled up under my desk. If I don't dig it out, he's going to start barking. Hang on, give me just a second here.
This is going to make a great show here.
Yeah. Anybody that's worked with any police dogs or stuff like that, or military dogs, know this right here. That's the number one thing they love. So here you go, Jake. But, anyway, he's got like 3 or 4 of them around here. He's got upstairs toys, downstairs toys, and out in the yard toys. But, anyway, so we Mark sort of, he said he had figured out what he thought the voice of God was, and he wanted me to do some digging and see what I thought the voice of God was. And I got to reading in some of the stuff, and it came to me. I said, the voice of God is, I got to reading about Jericho. And the voice of God was those trumpets that the angels and the Israelites were playing when they were marching around the walls of Jericho that eventually brought the walls of Jericho down. And Mark said, exactly. He said those are called a shofar. I said, shofar, huh? So I got to digging what a shofar was. And I had made contact, and I don't know why my camera's not in focus all of a sudden. I guess when I crawled under the desk, it messed it up. Let me see. Straighten up.
It's all good.
Anyway, when I got to looking, or I had found this Jewish mystic up in upstate, up in New York, and that I had been talking with. And he was sort of like Mark. He'd give me a little tidbit, and I'd go off and study. And then I'd come back to him and tell him what I thought I'd figured out or thought I'd learned, and he'd tell me yes or no. So that went on for a while, and eventually, I came to him and I said, and I asked him, I said, is the voice of God a shofar? And he said, yes, sir. And I said, so we were trying to figure out so then the question is, what kind of shofar? Because there's several kinds. And anyway, we eventually figured out what kind of a shofar we were looking for. And we started looking. And lo and behold, and I had talked to my wife about it. My wife and I were at an antique store, and she was looking around for something, and I was going back there. I always like to look at the old tools and stuff, old vintage tools and things, and I like to get old tools and fix them up, clean them up, make them usable again. And so I was at the tool part, and my phone rings. My wife, and she said, "Hey, you need to come back here. I think I might have found one of those Jewish horns that you and Mark have been talking about." And I went back there, and oh my God, it was. And at least it's what I thought it was. And so I called Mark up, and I took a picture of it. Took a picture of her standing there holding it. I sent it to Mark. I said, "Mark, is this the right kind of shofar?" And he's like, yeah, where did you find that? I said, "That's my wife holding it." He said, buy it. And he says, "What do they want for it?" And I said, $35. And he's like, "Oh my God, buy it. And we found out those things, the starting price of those, if you just go to buy one, they start at $300 and something and go and skyrocket up from there. That type. So I bought it for $35, and I'm thinking, there's probably something wrong with this thing. So I called up the Jewish guy, the mystic, and he asked me very specific things about it, very specific things. And I had to do some measurement, and I took some pictures and sent to him. Turned out this was exactly what we were looking for. And so I picked that up, and I figured, well, it's like blowing a bullhorn. I grew up coon hunting and stuff like that. And we'd blow bullhorns to call the dogs with and stuff. So I figured it'd I blow it just like a bullhorn. Wrong. I could make a sound out of it, and plus, I'd heard it being blown in the synagogue. I had an aunt that was Jewish, and then plus I had some Jewish friends. I delivered papers I had a paper route for years in a Jewish neighborhood, and so I've been to some different things at the synagogue. I've been to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and Jewish weddings. So I had seen a goat horn shofar blown in the synagogue. So it didn't take me very long to figure out how to replicate the stuff I'd heard in the synagogue. Well, he told me, he said, He said, that ain't, he said, the Nephilim won't respond to that. This is the Jewish mystic. And he explained some things to me about this thing. And so it took me over a year of practicing with this thing to get where I could do it right. And I literally put blood blisters on my lips learning how to blow the thing. And so I couldn't wait to try it. When I finally got it where I could, of course, I couldn't play it to him over the phone what I was doing, I did. I put it on speaker and blew it a time or two, but I don't know if he could tell much about it. But I was able to describe to him what I was doing, and he said, yeah, he said, I think you got it. So I knew of a place up in Iowa, not far from me. This is when we were still living in Missouri. I went up there, and this is a place where I had been, the boogers were pretty belligerent and had run me off before. And so I went up there, took the researchers from the area with me, and I went up there. And I didn't want to do this by myself because one of the things he had told me, he said, if you get it right, he said, they will be compelled to come to you immediately. Not later on, but immediately if you can do it right. And he said, but I don't know what they're going to do when they get there. So we were very heavily armed. And we went up there, and I was so excited and everything, and plus it was pretty cold that night. And I messed around for 30, 45 minutes trying to get that thing to blow properly. I couldn't do it. Sounded like I was slaughtering geese and ducks out there. And that's all the noise I could get out of it. And nothing. I mean, there not a sound of any kind were we hearing back. I mean, nothing. I even got where I did just a few regular calls with my mouth like I normally did, and nothing. And I thought, well, I wonder if they've run the boogers out of here, or what's going on. And so I took a breather, and then I tried again. About my third try, that second go around, I hit it. And the woods around us erupted. And wildest screams and yells and stuff started coming back at us. It scared the crap out of us. What was really crazy, we heard some out to the southwest of us yelling and screaming. They're coming straight towards us fast. We heard some straight south yell, and we heard some sort of to the northeast. And they were coming to us at a fast, and we didn't know what to do. The really weird thing is all of a sudden a whole pack of coyotes ran out. We were sitting on a road, and they ran out into the road west of us, but within sight of us. And they were all milling around the road and had their tails hunkered down, tucked down, and their heads dropped down, their ears lay down, and they were just milling around out the road, sort of. And they were terrified. Those coyotes were. And I don't know if we interrupted a coyote hunt where the Bigfoot were hunting the coyotes and the coyotes ran to us for refuge or what. They didn't come right to us. They stayed about 50 yards from us. But there was a pack of, I don't know, 6 to 8 coyotes out there in front of us, wandering, milling around the road. Well, these boogers came charging up, and they got to where they could see us, up close enough to us that they could see us. Now, we had thermals with us. We had a thermal with us, and we could see them. And they got up to within about 35 or 40 yards of us and just stopped. And hang on just a second. Let me see what this is. And they just stopped. And they were just standing there in the woods, sort of milling around. Now, we had 3 different groups, and they were not trying to interact with each other. They were focused on us down there in the road. And they just stood there. And we stood there and looked at them on the thermals and stuff. And I don't know how long we stayed there. It was such a strange incident. And we tried to, my thermal has video capability on it. And I kept trying to get my video to work, but my batteries were too low. And so I didn't get any video. Got a few still pictures. But all you see is just a blob out there in the woods, and it's you don't get much definition. My thermal is one of the most least expensive ones you can find. But I was afraid that that those ones that were standing there were going to be sort of keeping us occupied watching them, and then some more were going to sneak up on us much closer. So we were walking around our vehicles trying to look and listen and make sure that they weren't doing that, but they were not. But we began to feel quite uneasy, all of us, and there were 4 or 5 of us there. I think there were 5 of us. So we decided to leave there and go to another place nearby, where there had been quite a number of sightings over the years, and another place I had researched previously. So we went there, and it's a lot of people don't think of Iowa as having bayous in it, but there are a few in bayou along the Mississippi River. And so we went to this area. Well, not long before this, they'd had a flood, and we went down to where I had researched before, and the levee was partially washed out, and the road had been washed away. However, they had gone in there with a dozer and had leveled it out right up against the base of this partially scoured away levee. So we found the boat ramp that I had been to before, and it was also, the levee was scoured out right there by the boat ramp. And there was probably the levee at that point was 12 to 15 feet tall. And so I thought, well, this is cool, because that levee behind us will act like a reflector, and my calls and everything will, we could tell that it had been washed away. A place that you used to be able to drive out onto was now an island. And I said, but there are a lot of boogers in that area. And I said, there are probably still some out on that island, because it may be an area where we can't, here in the dark, we can't see it, but you might still be able to wade out there to it. So we backed up against that levee, and sort of like being in a theater, where an amphitheater, where you've got a a good acoustic background behind you, I blew the shofar again, and I managed to hit it second or third time, and we got answers from two places out on the islands, and they came up to the shore of these islands, and they were too far away for me to pick up on the, we could hear them, but they were too far away to pick up on my thermal. But we shined spotlights over there, and we could see the eye shine, and we heard them when they were coming. You know, heard them yelling and stuff. So we're standing there, and I'm focused on those out on the island, and one of the guys elbowed me and goes like this. I turned around and looked up, and there's one standing on top of the levee looking down at us. And that was just about a Brown Shorts moment.
I can imagine.
Yeah. It stood there and looked at us, and we sort of walked away from the levee, about 8-10 feet, and it turned around and just walked away, but we heard it clearly walking away. We never heard it make a sound. I never heard it make a sound as it was approaching us, coming up behind us. And the guy that clued us in that it was there, he said he heard the tiniest little noise. He said he thought it was maybe possibly a rat or a possum or something like that. He said he heard a faint rustling in the leaves there above us. And that's what made him look around. And it walked away, but it didn't go very far. And we hung around there for a while. And of all things, we had some folks show up, some commercial fishermen show up, and came in there and launched their boats, and that sort of screwed everything up. So we left. So that one outing, I considered it very successful. We'd blown the shofar in two places and had gotten boogers to come to us at both places. And I've used it in a number of places since then. I've used it in Iowa, Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky, Oklahoma. I know I'm forgetting some places. I don't know. I've used it in a half a dozen or better states. And I had a bad incident happen blowing it around my house in Missouri. So as a result of that, I've agreed with the wife that I'm not going to blow it around the house anymore.
You got to keep those promises.
Yeah. So I have gotten out of practice. So we went out last night and to some places near here in North Alabama, mostly along the Tennessee River, and we went to 3 or 4 different places, and I never could hit the right note. And I got just a squawk in the last place we were at, and they sounded off, and we had a couple coming to us, and unfortunately we were at a place that was down in a management area, and there was a public boat ramp down there. And even though this was 2 o'clock in the morning, we had some guy that came piling in there on us, and he was acting sort of crazy, so we figured we better leave. So we did. So I hated to do that because we left before the boogers got there.
Yeah.
Now, interesting thing, we left, and we hadn't been out of there 30 seconds, and here he came roaring up behind us and past us. This is on a 1-lane dirt road down in the boonies. So I've been speculating that Oh, we left, and the boogers got there when showed up. He was the only one there, so all I know is he wanted out of there, and he wanted out of there fast. he came he he chased us down and came flying past us. He came up behind us pretty fast, so we pulled over and let him go by.
Yeah.
He left out faster than he came in. I tell you that. So I don't know what happened.
So
But
you mentioned a shofar, and
yeah,
you mentioned that they normally use a goat horn shofar in the temples and stuff.
right.
This is
And that
something
doesn't
you're not just going to pick up something and blow it and get them to come in. You got to get the right thing and the right pitch and everything.
exactly. And the thing is, I want to warn people about is we don't know what happens if you get a bad one. I'm saying if you call up the wrong one, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to let the dog out. Just give me a second.
That's fine. Mark, when are you going to get a shofar?
Those things are hard to blow. I mean, we witnessed that up in Ohio.
Yeah. We witnessed it at LBL too.
Yeah.
Because Coonbo's
Yeah.
practiced at it a lot, and it's hard to get that
Yeah.
thing there and holding your lips right and all that.
Yeah, and it's extremely difficult. It's not in the least bit intuitive what you do, and
Yeah.
it took a tremendous amount of practice and stuff to get it right. And now I haven't practiced in the last couple of probably 3 years, or almost 3 years, and now I've been out there, trying to do that thing for 20, 30 minutes at a whack, and
Yeah.
the first couple of places we went, I was not able to get one decent note out of it, and I got one squawk. Like I said, it sounded like I'd stepped on a duck, or something, and
Yeah.
you had to come out at close to the right pitch, and they lit up and started hollering back, and here they came. But now in Oklahoma, out there, I was in good practice, and we went to this one place, and when we triangulated our where we were hearing them from, we were sort of scattered out a little bit. I was calling them up from 2 to 2.5 miles away.
Hmm.
And those dudes were coming hard and fast. And they covered that in an amazingly short amount of time, raising Cain about every 10, 15 seconds. They were yelling back. And we had 3 different groups that we called up. And again, they came in till they could see us, and then they stopped.
Yeah.
But what worries me is what's going to happen if I get in one of these areas where we got a rogue out there that's got an axe to grind with humans, and you summon him in a manner that's compelling to him that he has to respond to, and he gets there and it's just some redneck from Alabama standing there with a horn in his hand, and
Yeah.
and what's going to happen, I strongly caution people against just grabbing this and going out there and start blowing it indiscriminately, because we don't know what's going to happen. We've only been messing with this thing for, on a very limited basis for, about 3-4 years, about 4 years. And so it's I know people have heard me talking about it, and there are people that are out there using them, and with varying degrees of success, and maybe with no success. I don't know, but I just know this, that anybody that says that they know, what's going to happen every time you use one of these things, they're not telling the truth. Nobody has used one of these things enough to know what's going to happen if they're safe. And uh, we've had good results with them in some places. Now, I've blown it even when I was in practice. I've used it in a lot of places where, got no answer whatsoever. It's just like anything else. You if you're out there really, really spending time in the woods and calling and such as that, at best, at best, you're going to have some kind of response that you can attribute to a Bigfoot, maybe 20% of the time, maybe. And out of that 20%, if you have some kind of a sighting, some kind of a visual, even if it's just a glimpse of eyeshine, if you have 1 in 10 of those, you're doing really good.
Yeah.
And even somebody like me that's been doing this for over 40 years, I went for years and years without having an up close visual myself. I've had a lot of glimpses of eye shines. I've seen them at a little bit of a distance. I've seen them belly crawling. I've picked them up on thermals a bunch, a lot of stuff like that. But as far as having a really up close personal deal where that dude's up within 15, 20 feet of you, I went for years and years and years without having one of those. And then I had one down in Oklahoma, there on the Red River. But
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
a lot of people really want to get caught up on what you have been doing over the past couple of years. Why don't you tell us about your Oklahoma trip?
Okay, well, I've had 2 Oklahoma trips in the last few years, and last couple of years, and um, the first one was we were down on the Red River, and we went down by, believe it or not, by Brown Springs, expecting to have a lot of stuff happening, and basically nothing happened. I mean, it was totally dead there, and well, I mean, we spent a good bit of time down there during the day exploring around the old cemetery, and I was really, really disappointed to see that the old cemetery there has been vandalized horribly, and a lot of stuff that was there 20 years ago is gone or torn up. That was really disappointing. The roads have been improved somewhat down there, so it's more accessible than it used to be. You can actually get to more areas down in there that you can now drive up to areas that we used to have to hike into. But it's still boogery. I mean, I know they're still in there. It's just that, boogers just don't sit there in one place waiting for you to show up. And they're smart enough that they don't deplete the food supply in any one area. They have a big home territory that varies by the season, and it'll take anywhere from a week to 2 to 3 weeks for them to work around the circuit around through their territory. So the alpha females probably, and maybe alpha male to some degree, but it's probably more the females. They know where the food sources are at different times, and they absolutely positively keep track of things like apple orchards, peach orchards, persimmons, muscadine vines, fox grapes, things like that are coming into season. They know when they're ripe and when they're not. But they are constantly moving through their territory on a circuit that's of their own making. And sometimes you can nail them down. Like I've been places where I knew every week to 10 days I could catch them in this one general area. But not researching that that not being there very often, years in between the times there around Thackerville, I don't know what the uh, how big of an area that the local bookers cover, or how long it takes them to work through it, and when to expect them at a certain place. So it's just hit or miss. So we didn't find anything then. That doesn't mean that the boogers aren't there. They're still there. They just weren't right there around Brown Springs when we were there. It's like LBL, and that's a vast area. And as much as people think, the population density of Bigfoot in LBL is a lot lower than some areas. Uh, and there's different ways of knowing that. One of the ways is by looking for territorial markers. And there's an old saying out in the country: good fences make good neighbors. And uh, boogers are smart. Bigfoot are smart. They're not going to spend time and energy putting up territorial markers and such, and X's and twists and bows and stuff, that's their fences. They're not going to spend time and energy doing that if there's no neighbors close by for them to worry about encroaching on their territory. So that's one of the prime things I look at when I go into the area, is the amount of territorial markers. That gives me a good idea of the population density. And there are very few areas in LBL where you're going to find very many territorial markers directed at other troops of Bigfoot. But I can take you to places in Texas and Oklahoma and Mississippi and Alabama where they're just everywhere. So that there's a very high population density there, because all the different Bigfoot troops have their territory staked out. And there's an area down in Texas, down in the Big Thicket. First time I saw it, made me think about the old song "All My Exes Live in Texas," because we're riding down this road through this state forest, and I mean, there's just X formations just lined up down through there like a picket fence. And that's and X formations are not directed at us usually. Those are directed at neighboring troops of Bigfoot. That's a keep out sign for, Moog over here's got his place staked out, but he doesn't want Og over here coming over and raiding his muscadine vines, So they mark their territory very well. So anyway, back to the story. So we moved down we left the Brown Springs area. We moved down the Red River, probably about 70, 80 miles, into a place that we'd never been, but we had heard some sighting reports in this area. And we, the area there, the topography and all was quite a bit different than the area around Brown Springs. Like I said, we weren't able to make contact with any of the locals. And we were just literally wandering around, and we'd find a good place. This looks like a good place to call, so we'd stop and make a few calls. And we were driving along, and we were trying to get to this one particular place, and we got turned around, made a wrong turn, and there were about 3 truckloads of us. And as we were turning around, I didn't see it, but the next guy behind me that was pulled into this place turned around, he spotted over there in the grass, and the people in his vehicle saw it. And the next one, there was one crouched down in some sage grass, sort of like what's the grass behind me in the little side window over there. And they saw the eye shine and everything. That's what clued them in. When I turned around there, my headlights didn't shine right on it, and so I didn't ever see it. But we went about another half a mile or so, we're going along, and several of us in my vehicle, we all got that feeling that, hey, we need to stop here. So we stopped, and it's not the kind of area that I like to stop and call at, because it was the vegetation and all was encroaching right up to the edge of the road. And literally, it was there were a lot of places there. If you stepped 3 feet off the road, you couldn't see. You could have hidden an elephant in there and wouldn't have been able to see it. But there were some there were gaps in the cover there, and that made it a little bit more palatable for us that don't want to be, don't want something to reach out of a bush and grab us, and we're gone, never to be seen again. But anyway, we stopped, and I got out and shut my engine off and everything, killed the headlights and all, and I walked around to the front of my truck, and it's pretty quiet, and other folks were getting out back behind me. I thought, well, dadgum, I left my thermal in the truck. Yeah, I normally kept it on a lanyard around my neck. I was feeling around for it, and I felt in my pocket. Well, dadgum, I left my thermal. So I went around there and I opened the door and got it out it was laying there on the console, and I got it out and I turned it on. Well, this thing takes about 15, 20 seconds to boot up. And so it's booting up, and I looked up and I looked through it and nothing, and I picked it up again and looked through it, and the eyepiece was just lit up, just bright, lit up. I said, what is wrong with this thing? And I put it down, I raised it up again, and then I realized something was moving across, and I realized there is a booger right in front of me, like 20 feet away, something like that. And then I realized, and it is a big one. Figured out later it's about 9 foot, 8.5, 9 feet. And I'm like, look. And there were guys back there, look. Of course, it was black, pitch dark. It was overcast. There was no moon. So nobody knew, but they could, by this time I had I was like, look. Well, some of the guys looked around, they saw the only light that they saw, they could see the imager on my thermal, and they could see it, and they could hear me. So they're all looking, and a couple of 3 guys got their thermals on it, and the thing walked across the road. It was standing there right in the edge of the brush on the right-hand side of the road. It walked right across the road, right in front of me. And the thing, by this time I had stepped back a little bit so I could get more of it in my field of view. And the first thing I noticed, it had a big old baggy butt on it, like Patty in the Patterson-Gimlin film. And in fact, it sort of looked like it had a big old dirty diaper hanging off of its rear end. And but there was an oak tree right on the side of the road. I mean, just the road. I'm sure the road grader or whatever made that road there. They had to sort of go around that oak tree a little bit. But there was an oak tree there, probably 2.5 feet in diameter, something like that. And this thing walked behind the oak tree, and it leaned over like this, and it's leaned over and it's looking at us. And that's when I saw its face. And that thing was close enough to me that I could see its eyes, because the eyes show up a lot hotter than the rest of the face. And the funny thing about it, it's up there and it's leaning like, let me scoot back to the camera. It's leaning like this. So his head was on one side of the tree and his rear end was sticking out from the other side of the tree. But it thought it was behind the tree. And by this time, a bunch of the other guys were seeing it, and it sat there looking. I started laughing because I said, that thing thinks it's hiding, and then it can't even come close to getting behind that tree. It's so big, and it straightened up, and it turned, and it just sort of started walking back through the woods, and And it just so happened that where it went, it was one of these gaps in that thick brush. And it walked in there probably about 30, 35 feet back into the woods. And there was a big cedar tree there. And it walked in behind that cedar tree and then turned around and sort of got off to the edge of it and was looking back at us. And everybody that had a thermal, and one guy had a really good, like a Gen 2 Plus or a Gen 3 starlight scope, night vision scope, and he could see it. I think he had his infrared illuminator on. I'm not sure, but he could see it. But there was like at least 4 of us, maybe 5 of us sitting there that could see the thing. It stood there for a while looking at us. About that time, somebody said, "Look at the road, look at the road." And I'm sitting there looking off in the woods. So I turn and look down the road. There's 3 of them, 3 more out in the road, about 70, 80 yards down the road from us. And they're just all standing there. They're all, let me see if I can. Yeah. Anyway, they're just standing there sort of like this. And one of them sitting there doing this. That a little bit slower than that. He just sort of doing this. And he was nervous. And the other 2 are just standing there stock still. And I could tell even through the thermal, I could tell that those boys, I don't know if they might be looking out for their buddy or whatever, but they're ready for action. Well, about that time, here comes 2, 3 guys past me walking down there. I'm thinking, you idiots, don't go down there. They didn't even break stride. About that time, a dadgum hog, a big hog, wild hog. Now, this is one of them shown up wild hog, walked right out of that brush, just past where that big booger had come from. That had just walked across the road in front of me, came sort of staggering out into the road and just stopped. I'm thinking, oh my God, those guys are fixing to get eat up by that hog. I ran to my truck and yanked out my shotgun, which I had loaded up with some bad slugs made for killing hogs. And I would run up there and I jacked around in that thing and was pointing at the hog, and the hog was just sort of standing there. And then I realized, and I put a light on it, and that thing was addled. It never even looked at us. It was acting like it didn't even know why we were there. And it just it's sort of standing there, and it's obviously, I think we interrupted a hog hunt, and I think that one that walked across the road from me, or one of the other ones, had a hold of that hog and maybe slapped it upside the head or banged it against a tree or something, because that dude was obviously, it didn't know, there were 4 or 5 guys right around it, and me standing there with a shotgun fixing to shoot it, and it never even acknowledged our presence. And finally, it just sort of teetered and walked off over here in the brush and wandered off. And so we looked around. After that, we looked up, and the 3 boogers that were standing in the road, they were gone. They were not in the road, but we could see through the thermal that one of them was still, there was a curve in the road right there. One of them was standing there right in that curve looking at us. So they just headed on down there. And I said, I ain't going down there with wild hogs wandering around out here. And we know we got one out yonder. Where'd the other 2? There's one down there. I mean, there's a booger out here. There's a hog down. There's a booger standing there looking at us. There's 2 boogers that we'd seen that we don't know where they are. Plus, there's at least one wild hog wandering around out here. So I just stood there. I said, I'm staying right here. I'm just going to cover everybody. And so I stood there with a shotgun, and they walked down there. Before they got down there, that one that we had been seeing, he just disappeared, just like that. Somebody turned a switch and he was gone. And they stood around down there, and one of the guys made a couple of little calls and no answer. Everything dead quiet. And so they turned around, they came walking back up. They got about 2/3 of the way back up there to our trucks. I'm looking around with thermals. here comes two of them walking back out in the road again. As soon as they turned around, they leave. So they obviously they weren't going to let us walk up on them, but they weren't going to leave right then anyway. About that time, we started hearing this crazy noise back in the woods to the right of us, where that big one had come from and where the hog had come from. And I'm trying to think, what in the world is that? And the noise just kept going on and on. And so a couple of the guys walked back in there, and they're looking around, and we heard them start laughing. They go, you got to see this. I go back in there, and it's a couple of raccoons on a very hot date. And I guess that's about all I can say about that. But anyway, there was a couple of raccoons back there having a good time, and that's the first time I'd ever witnessed that. It's pretty noisy. I can say that. But anyway, we hung around out there a while. We found an abandoned house out there, and it had a full basement underneath it, big concrete basement. And we thought, we shining our lights down the stairs and all that, looking at it. And the basement had water in it, and we're looking around down there and we're thinking, oh boy, but it was dry at this point. This would be a really good place for them to lay up in here. So we threw a couple of rocks down there and made a little racket. Now, mind you, this is probably 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So we get the bright idea, we're going to ease, those of us that's got heavy artillery with us, we're going to ease down that basement, look around and see what we can find. So we did. And we found a few juvie tracks, and we found some tracks down there about 13, 14 inches long. And that's all we found. But it's obvious they'd been in there. Now, we went back last October, and I'd been promising Wade Parker, my buddy Wade Parker lives down in Texas, that I'd take him to Brown Springs, I'd take him to some other places down in Oklahoma and maybe over in Texas. So we met up at a campground, and he brought his friend Paul with him, and I had a couple of my buddies with me, and we Kurt Moser was there, and my buddy Jim Sharp, and I'm trying to think who else was there, but it was a small group, so we were able to boil ourselves down into two vehicles going out. Well, we went back to Brown Springs and spent some time down there, and again, everything was totally. We didn't find anything, and so we spent a good bit of time moving out further and further around Brown Springs, and hoping to come up, just get lucky and stumble across the boogers. And I thought, but we never crossed over into Texas. We stayed on the Oklahoma side of the border. And I could tell you absolutely positively that those boogers don't think anything of crossing a river the size of the Red River in that area. And so they could have been over on the Texas side of the river. But we didn't find them. And we got out, quite a few miles away from the Brown Springs area and didn't find anything. So we left there and we decided to go back to the place where we'd had all that activity and had the boogers walk across the road in front of us, and where we'd found that abandoned house with the tracks to the basement. So we went back to there on a different night. We spent a whole night doing wider radius searches around and around Brown Springs, and with no luck. So we went back to this area where we had, like I said, where we'd had this activity the previous year. We got in there, and unfortunately, there'd been a lot of rain, and the old basement was had 3 or 4 feet of water in it, and we threw stuff down the stairs, and there was it looked like an old laundry drop chute. We dropped stuff down in there, and listened real careful, and there was no sloshing or anything, so there was nothing down in there, and there was no evidence that anything had been coming or going out of that place. So we left there and we went up to where we'd had the boogers walk out of the woods on us and the hog and all that. Nothing. So we decided to go to another area that we'd been wanting to check out, and we went there, and this was well away from the Red River, and we were just riding around and just exploring. And usually I don't like to go into an area cold at night, but this is what we were doing. And we were driving along, and we came to a small lake, and the road just went right out across the middle of the lake on a little narrow causeway that wasn't 18 inches above the water. And I thought, well, this would be a good place to call from. And we were in Wade's, I was riding in Wade's Humvee and his Hummer with him. And boy, he's got a booger mobile like nothing else I've ever seen. I mean, I'm jealous. I want one like that. But this thing was awesome. And I was really proud to be able to get to ride that thing with him. And so we're riding out there where we stop on this little causeway. And we get out. And it is quiet. I mean, other places we'd been, the frogs and all that stuff had been going like crazy and all kind of noises and stuff and regular night sound. This place was dead silent. So we stood out there, and I walked around. I looked around real good, trying to see how deep the water was around us. I thought, okay, the water's up. And I looked around a little bit, and I said, oh, okay, the water is, it's okay. It's just, it's not, water not foot 18 inches deep. This just okay. Anything you try to get to us out here, we'll be able to see it and hear it. And about that time, sploosh, a rock hits the water out there beside us. And we said, well, dadgum, where'd that come from? And I've got a headlight on. And I turned it on, and I start swinging it, and I see one coming. And this dude's about the size of a cantaloupe. And it goes over the causeway and lands on the other side. Bloosh, out there. I said, that son of a gun came from right over there, and we shined our lights, and we caught one, and he was out there in the water. And I don't know where he got the rocks. Oh, excuse me. We're thinking, well, I don't know where he got the rocks, but then we realized it was riprap along the side of the causeway. And that son of a gun apparently picked up one of those big, a riprap is large chunks of rock that they put along the side on riverbanks, creek banks, causeways, stuff like that to prevent erosion. And this was on a Texas county road. I mean, an Oklahoma county road. So it was a regular public road. We weren't on Forest Service roads or anything like that. It's a regular public road. And so that son of a gun was throwing chunks of riprap out there to intimidate us. When we put the lights on it, it sort of dove forward, and the water was a little bit deeper where it was than where right there where we were standing on the causeway. So it swam underwater, but it was leaving a very clear wake that we could see we could see in our lights. And there was a little peninsula of land that stuck out into this lake. And we watched it, and it swam around the end of that little peninsula, and it came up out of the water on the other side. There was a bunch of brush and like cattails and stuff growing out there on that peninsula. But we could still see it. It was close enough. It wasn't but about 50 yards away, and we could see it pretty clearly through our thermals. And by this time, since we'd already had our lights on, we thought, well, hell, we were looking over there, shining lights over there, and looking, and you could see the eye shine. It was over there watching us. And so I decided I'm going to do a couple of calls. So I called. And dude, back behind us over our shoulder to the northeast, it sounded like something shoved down one of the great redwoods or giant sequoias out in California. I've heard a lot of trees being pushed down. I have never heard anything like this. We heard boom. This thing was probably 90 to 100 yards away from us. We felt the vibration of that thing hitting the ground all the way out in our feet where we were standing out on that causeway. It shook everything. That was a huge tree that thing pushed down. Everybody had eyes the size of dinner plates. I mean, Moser and I have heard a lot of trees being pushed down. I've never heard anything. The biggest thing I've ever heard pushed down was smaller than half that size. Moser said he's never heard anything even remotely close to it. It was freaking unbelievable how big this thing was. And about that time, somebody says, look, and there's a chunk of riprap about the size, a little bit bigger than a basketball, but sort of oval shape, comes flying over the causeway and lands out there in the water beside my truck. And one of the guys was driving my truck, following us in behind. My truck was behind Wade's Hummer, and some other guys were driving my truck, and this big chunk landed out in the water beside my truck. And then we started getting answers to my calls, and they were coming from several different directions. Anyway, we got to looking around with our thermals, trying to make sure that nothing was getting right up on close to us. We looked over there where that first one was that we'd seen with our lights. We could still see the one out on that little peninsula, but there were two more standing up on the bank of the lake above where that one had been in the water when we first got there. They were just standing there. Well, Paul, Wade's buddy, had never seen one, clearly. He thought he might have seen glimpses of one, but he was dying to see a full body one. Well, we could tell through our thermals that, hey, full body boogers standing there in the wide open on the bank of the lake. So we got Paul in. I got Paul to come around behind me. I said, now, bud, I said, they're right over there. And there was enough starlight. There wasn't a moon out, but there was enough. It was a bright, clear night. There was enough starlight that you could see different trees and stuff over there on the bank. And we said, okay, you see this tree and that tree, and all right, this one is right between those trees, and the other one is just to the left of that left-hand tree. And I said, you get behind me, and I had my light held out like this. And I said, when I click that light on, I said, for a split second, you'll see those two buggers standing there. And I said, 99% chance or 90% chance what's going to happen, both of them are going to dive into that brush and stuff that's over there to the side. I said, there's a slight chance that you might get to see one a little bit longer. I said, but maybe all you're going to see And when I click that on, they're going to move so fast that all you're going to see is just eye shine that just instantly dives down to the ground or dives over in that brush. I said, but you look right down my arm and right across the top of that flashlight, just like it's a rifle barrel. I clicked it on. The one on the left dove into the bushes instantly. The one on the right just stood there. Some gun just stood there looking at us. And I said, right there, Paul. I said, I got my light right on it. I said, he's standing there. I can't see it. I can't see it. I said, he's standing totally still. He wasn't moving up. He wasn't even twitching. I said, Paul is right between the big tree on the left and the smaller tree on the right. I said, he's right between us and a little bit in front. He said, right between them. And he couldn't see it. Wade says, well, here, let me light it up. Wade had a green laser with him. Wade turned that laser on, and when that green laser, he put that thing right on that booger's chest. And as soon as that laser hit him, the booger goes and dives. And when he did his head and dove, Paul saw him. And man, he went crazy. I saw him. I finally got to see one. He was just elated. It took him an hour to get calmed down. And he said, I saw it. There, that thing's big, And I was tickled to death. He finally got to see one. But again, that's a 1 in 1,000 thing. I mean, to get to see one like that. And that just stands right there and poses for you. He's standing here. No, he wasn't. But anyway, but to get to actually see one just standing there, is exceedingly rare. And this dude, he didn't care. And but then about that time, I don't know if it was the laser, I don't know, but that laser scared the crap out of that booger. And instantly things started getting crazy. All around us, the other boogers around us, they started raising holy hell, raising Cain. Excuse me. They started raising Cain. And straight south of us, one was stomping out in the water. And then I realized I had walked back up towards Wade's Humvee, and I saw there was an old creek channel that came through there, and there was a culvert under the road. And I looked, and that water in that lake was really, really, really clear. It must have been spring fed or something. And I shined my light down, and I realized, dude, that water right there is 7 or 8 feet deep. Those ones that are on the south side of that lake or straight to the north of it, they could get that old creek channel. They could swim right up there and just reach up and snatch one of us right off that causeway. And it wouldn't be a thing we could do about it. I mean, we were in a totally indefensible position. And the boogers were mad. And they were getting louder, and they were coming in. And there was one of them started walking out. There was one that had just showed up on the south side. We'd been hearing him yelling over there, but that dude started walking out into the water. We could hear him splashing out in the water towards us, and this was not a very big lake. And we decided that the prudent thing to do was to leave. So we started out, and we had to drive right past where that 200-foot or 300-foot tall sequoia tree, that was 25 feet in diameter, had been shoved down. At least that's what it sounded like, felt like. We had to drive right past where that massive tree had been pushed down. And as we went by, we had the windows down in Wade's Hummer. I'm in the front seat on the passenger side. I hear a rock clicking through the tree limbs and stuff coming over us. And I still had my headlight on. And I looked up, and I caught the thing coming over the top of Wade's Hummer, about 4 or 5 feet above the roof of the Hummer, and it, clipping tree limbs, and it went out there about 10 feet, and whop, hit a tree trunk, ricocheted, back onto the ground as we went by. And we were off the causeway into the woods at that point. But it fired apart and shot at us as we were leaving. But and I just happened to catch it right. I think Wade got to see the rock as it came over the passenger side, hit the tree trunk. But everybody clearly heard it. But we left, and that was a good night. We had a pretty exciting incident there at that lake. But we actually got to see. We saw, I think, total of 4 boogers that we were actually able to lay eyes on.
Wow.
Which is that's extremely rare and extremely unusual. And we just happened to stumble into the right place at the right time. And we had no activity anywhere else that night. We tried going up, driving a ways, and we came up to a field, and that was only about a half to 3/4 mile away. And we got out in that where the road went across the field and stopped. And sometimes I've been successful when we've stirred them up like that to call them into us a second time, and I wasn't able to get anything to happen. I had the shofar with me, but again, I hadn't been in practice, and I couldn't get any decent noise out of it. So, and like I said, that was back last October. Now, last April, these 2 skanky dogs. Mr. Porch and Mr. Newble and myself and a couple others got talking. We decided we'd have us a little outing to LBL, and we went up there, and it didn't turn out quite exactly like we had intended, but we had a pretty good outing, and we ended up having to split up. Ended up being more people than we realized were going to come. And so didn't have a whole lot of activity around the camp like we usually do in this one area. And we guys, did y'all note any much activity around the camp when we were gone? I mean, it wasn't.
No.
Yeah, I mean, nobody, and I didn't hear anybody reporting anything that they'd seen or really heard anything. And we even pulled our ace in the hole out. We ran 2 generators during part of the night, and nothing happened. We went to a place where when we split up one night, we went to the group that I was with. We went to a place where we had a lot of activity about 20 years ago, and I had only been back to that place a couple of times during the intervening 20 years and had never had anything happen. But I like to lay out just sort of a route of, all right, we're going to explore this part tonight. We're going to research this part, or go see what we can stir up this area. And I'll have different places marked out on the map. So we started into our circuit in the first several places, nothing. And the bad part about it was that we were there during turkey season, and some of the campgrounds that we like to go at and call, where we've had success in the past, had people in them. So we went to a place that it was almost an afterthought, and I said, we had that really good results there, back about 20 years ago. So let's go hit that. I said, and it's on the way to another area that we were wanting to go to. And so we did. We went there, and we pulled up. We got out, and the odd thing was that I didn't get much vibe out of the place. One of the guys did. One of the guys with us was getting, he said, man, he said, there's something going on here, and myself personally, I wasn't getting a lot of vibe out of it. And so we just stood there and got quiet. We just stayed quiet listening for about 20 minutes. that I made one call. Let me pull this up. I made one call, and this is a short version of what answered us. I'm going to turn the volume up so y'all can hear. All right, here we go. Oh, give me a minute. Here we go. Here we go. Play that again. Okay. Now, can you hear me okay? I had to mess with my volume a little bit.
Yeah, you're good.
Did it come through okay on your end?
It
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's a short clip out of about 20 seconds, maybe 20, 25 seconds worth of 25, 30 seconds worth of howling and carrying on. Now, this recording was made with a recorder that in the MP3 format rather than the WAV format or some full spectrum format. So this recording doesn't give this thing justice to what it really sounded like in person. Plus, we were spread out over enough of an area that we triangulated where the call came from. This call is coming from somewhere between 450 and maybe 525 yards away from us. Now, that's over a quarter of a mile away. And so if that thing sounded that loud on a recording, and those microphones, Cheryl Corntassel was holding the microphones in his hands up in the air. And for those things to sound that loud from that distance, this is some serious lung power. And you can't even imagine what it sounded like in person. Now, we're still doing a lot of research on this thing, but we've run this thing through several different spectral analysis programs. It is an extremely unique trace, and I am not. Don't ask me to pull it up and show it to you because this is where we're still working on this. But I can tell you that we've got some very well-known and very extremely experienced audio people involved in helping us work on this, and that have had a lot of experience with Bigfoot calls and Dogman calls. And we are 90+% sure that this is a Dogman call. And the extremely unique thing about this call is, and you cannot tell this by listening to the tape, but even though this was an MP3 format, when we ran it through the spectrum analyzer, there are at least 9 separate bandwidths in that call. We know of no other animal that can produce a sound with more than 3 bandwidths. These guys that have been doing this thing and recording everything from lions and tigers and bears and wolves and coyotes and people and all kind of crazy musical instruments and stuff have never seen anything like this. But you can even clearly see it on the traces. You can clearly count the bandwidths. on the trace. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been working around with spectral analysis stuff since back in the 1980s. I've never seen anything like this. And I mean, we used to play around with crap, making weird ass noises. I mean, weird noises. And I mean, we would do stuff. We would get in showers or carry things down in like a didgeridoo down in a big culvert, or in one of the government labs that I worked at for 3.5 years. We had a lot of acoustic chambers where we generated all types of noises and stuff. I've played with a bunch of that acoustic generation equipment, and I've never been able to generate anything like that, even in the lab, but I've never heard anything like that, so I've never tried to generate anything like that. But we have played with trying to reproduce Bigfoot calls and stuff like that, and come up with some kind of man-made something that we could say that, hey, this is just somebody playing out with it. This guy just recorded a didgeridoo down in a culvert, trying to debunk some of the calls and stuff that people have recorded. And but I've never seen a spectral trace like this. Some guys that have been doing this way more than me and for a lot longer than me, they've never seen anything like it either. So I'm pretty well convinced that, well, the first time I heard it, I just knew in my gut that it was a dog man when it was happening real time. In fact, on that clip, you heard me say, that's not a coyote. And one of the other guys that's heard some of this, he says, there's your dog man. you say it. And but we actually, when we were there, we heard that loud one that you heard just now. He answered first. Then there was another one that answered that was in roughly the same direction, but more to the south, but probably another 50 to 60, 75 yards distant, further away. It answered. And then there was a third one that was 180 degrees away from that behind us, that was probably 600 or 700 yards away. And it was very faint, and you could just barely hear it in the full recording with the thing turned up, with the volume turned up real high. But we heard it, being there. But the coyotes, it tripped off the coyotes also when those things got to going, and you hear a lot of the coyotes start up and all. And I don't know if we interrupted a coyote hunt, because we heard some of the classic things that real time, and then it shows up on the tape, some of the classic things that indicate a coyote hunt, which is the coyotes started up and started doing all their things, and all of a sudden you hear, and it's dead silence. And we have found that that's what happens when the coyote is killed. One of the coyotes is killed. But I don't know. We're still working on that recording, trying to figure out, narrow it down, eliminate any other possibilities, and trying to find anything else, scrounge up anything that we could comparable to this, and we've found nothing. We're going to be taking sometime in hopefully the near future a vocals recording expert back into that area, and hope and pray that we can find this thing again and get it to sound off again. An interesting thing about this was found in a part of LBL that's, we've never heard of a dogman sighting report out of this area, this part of LBL. And this could possibly lend some credence to the claims from some of the locals that the dogmen are moving in and expanding their territory within LBL. Don't know that. but we will be looking and following this more closely in the future. And another interesting thing, there's an area where historically over a long period of years that we've recorded a noise that we call the yeeps. And we'd only ever recorded it in this one small area, from this one location. We've been in there on foot trying to outmaneuver this thing, trying to put an eyeball on it, trying to catch it in thermal, trying to catch it in a night vision scope. We've tried all kind of things, and it outmaneuvers us. And sometimes we've been there where there are as many as 4 or 5 of these things out there in different areas, and we've split up and gone in from different sides trying to see something, and they outmaneuver us. I can imitate the call perfectly, and they answer me consistently. The last couple of times we've been down there, we haven't been able to find the yeeps that we call them where they had been, and thought that was weird. Okay, we were completely on the other side of LBL, and probably 15, maybe 20 miles away from where we had found them before. And again, we're going down, we're just riding down a road. We were headed to one area and the place we were wanting to check out, and we were riding along, and Cheryl Corntassel and I both just felt at the same time, we thought, man, we need to stop. We were getting the vibe. And we stopped, we got out, and we didn't even realize that we were exactly, hang on just a second, let this dog in. I'm about to tear the back door off. Come on. Well, I didn't know you were out too. And 2 of them were out. Man, there's Joe. Hey, buddy. This is Joe. Anybody remembers my old dog, Bo? This looks like he could be his son.
Bo and Joe.
Yeah. Beautiful Joe. Yeah. He's about as sorry as old Bo was. But he's a good old dog. And I'll tell you one thing, he's taken our grandsons to raise.
Yeah.
But yeah, he loves kids. Anyway, so we stopped, and we didn't even realize till we stopped and got out and got to looking around what kind of a weird little place we were in. And so we stood there, and most of the folks with us, they were creeped out. They didn't like this place at all. And we stood there for a while, and some of the guys were going, man, we need to go. We need to go. I said, no, just come. Everything's cool. He's scared, get in the truck, you know. And so we stood there for a little while, and Cheryl got his recorder going, and I made a call. And lo and behold, out to the southeast of us, the yeep answered us. We had no idea. I mean, we weren't even, that was the last thing on our mind, but we heard that yeep out there. And I said, holy cow. And, 2 or 3 of the guys that were with us had heard that before, had been with us before, and they said, did you hear that? Did you hear that? The yeeps are over here. And we sat there, and I answered it back. and it started moving. And that son of a gun moved a big circle around us. Now, it never did come in close like it used to at the other place, but it was there, and it was moving, and it sort of worked its way around us, about a half circle around us. And every time I'd call, it'd answer us back. And then sometimes I wouldn't answer it. It'd wait a little bit, and finally it would call again, and I'd answer it. But that went on we messed with it, or it messed with us for, I don't know, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes or so, and finally it got tired of us, and he said, he got tired of us, and it went away from us back to the west, and it kept calling, but it just got more and more faint. And luckily, Cheryl was able to catch it on his recorder, but it was still, it's pretty. Even the best recordings we have on them, you have to turn the volume up pretty loud to hear them, because it's not a loud noise at all. But we don't know what the thing is.
Wow.
But it's yeah, and it's been close. We've been close enough to it at times that we know it's not on the ground. It's not flying from tree to tree. It's coming from something upright that's our height or a little taller. So we've been able to determine that. And the thing moves very, very quietly. Every once in a while, it'll make a mistake and it'll step on a stick or something. But it knows exactly where we are. I mean, we've been in there with as many as 8 people trying to surround one of these things, and somehow it gives us a slip. And Dan Ricky's been throwing stuff mad before when we
I can say that.
trying to hem it up, and he's been so frustrated. Back years ago, and Dan has busted some serious brush trying to hem up one of these things. We don't know what we're dealing with. I don't know if it's just we're dealing with some juvies that are just enjoying, frustrating us, or vexing us, or whatever. But we've never been able to put eyeballs on it. A few times we've thought we've seen eye shine, but not for sure. But so we did that back in April, and then I've been doing some local stuff here with some of my buds here. A guy named Jimmy Osmer that I've known since back in the 90s, and at that time we didn't know that both of us were interested. And we used to work together and didn't know that we were both interested in Bigfooting. And we got back together, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, and finally got to start doing some stuff together. But then a couple of other guys that I've been communicating with for years down here in Alabama, and back last year I started trying to get together a group of these guys that sort of been doing independent stuff for years, and I invited them all out to my farm and here in North Alabama, and we spent a weekend out there, and I took them out. We went out boogering in a bunch of different places. I taught them some things, and we got to know each other, and so that was a good deal. They've stuck together since then, and got them sort of a group here. So 4 of us got together last night. Buddy, like I said, Jimmy Osmer and Greg Howes and his buddy Alan, and we went out boogering. And unfortunately, it was a very, very, very stormy night last night, and we had some bad storms. I mean, we were out there during it, and it blew down trees and power lines and stuff like that, and we were, in between the different waves of the storm, we were out there calling, and I was trying to blow that confounded shofar, and about blew my lungs out. It's one of the things they warned me about. It takes a lot of lung power to do the thing, and they said that if you mess with it too much, you can cause yourself to have emphysema.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you sort of got to balance that, and But anyway, the last place we went, and it took forever to get back in there. And it was a place there along the Tennessee River. And we had to drive over some blown down trees and stuff. And that was that was that was a trip. Fortunately, we were in two 4-wheel drive trucks. And because some of these places, being as wet and nasty and everything, and back in the boonies as they are, you don't want to just go in there with one vehicle in case you get stuck. And I had the shoulder collapse. I was in the front. My truck was a front truck, and we were going along in one place, and the shoulder of the road collapsed near a culvert because it'd been such horrendous rains, and I almost turned almost turned my truck over and scared the bejeebers out of us. And the guys behind us said my left rear tire was at least foot and a half off the ground there for a little bit. But I was running. It's one thing I love about my new truck is it's got an all-wheel drive setting. So I had it in all-wheel drive, and as soon as it started caving off, I cut the wheel hard left and gunned it, and it managed to claw its way back up onto the road. If it hadn't, it would have been sideways, laying on its side in a pretty deep ditch. But I got lucky. And then we came up on another place where there was a big chunk of a tree in the road, and I was trying to go around it, and the dadgum shoulder caved off again. And I managed. I caught it. I was going slower, and I was able to feel it more easily than the first time, and I managed to get out of there before it caved off completely. So guys behind me had to drive right over the top of a bunch of stuff to get through. But anyway, we got up to a place where about 4 trees had blown down. 4, I don't know, foot to foot and a half diameter trees had blown down across the road, and I put it in low lock 4-wheel drive and was able to work my way slowly across them. And guys behind me, their truck's not quite as high as mine, but they made it across just fine. We got down to this old ancient boat ramp there on the river, on part of the old main channel of the river. Not we're out of the impoundment, into one of the old sections of the river channel. And this is a place that had been used by commercial fishermen for decades, maybe even 100 years. I don't know. And but not anymore. They don't commercial fish there anymore. But anyhow, we got there, and there are agricultural fields up very close to this. So I knew it'd be a good place to call from, both across the river and around us as well on our side of the river. So I did a couple of calls, got no answer. However, it was deathly quiet there, very unusually quiet. So I decided to get out the shofar and see if I might get lucky. And I messed with that thing for 20 minutes, and I finally got one squawk out of it, and it was at barely the right. It was barely halfway correct, but we got an immediate answer. And we got 2 answers coming from the same direction, and we soon realized that they were coming to us. And they were raising so much cane, a bunch of owls got to going. So it sounded like we had an owl convention with a couple of boogers hollering right in the middle of it. And the call that they were making coming to us is a call that I use sometimes when I've been using other calls. I know they're out there, and I use this call to make them mad. and to goad them into answering me. And that's the call that they were making as they were coming to us, which had us sort of uneasy. About that time, we hear a truck, a loud truck, and we realized it was a diesel of some kind. And when I first heard it, I thought we were within long earshot of a highway. And I thought, well, that's just some kind of a truck over there on the side of the highway. Then we realized, no, that's somebody trying to bring a diesel truck through those trees that are down. And they were having a difficult time of it. And we got to listen. In the meantime, these boogers are coming in on us, and they came from quite a long distance. They were coming from over a half a mile away, and by this time they were probably within a 500-600 yards of us maybe, and we could tell they were trying to zero in on us where we were. And under ordinary circumstances, what we would have done is we would have had some very bright lights, because really and truly you can stop mad boogers with a bright light in the face easier than you can with a gun. And the last thing you want to do is shoot one. And ordinarily what we'd have done is we'd have had our really bright flashlights or spotlights out, and we would have backed up away from the edge of the woods where we had sort of a clear buffer zone between us and them. If they'd have busted out of those woods on us, we'd have put those lights in their face.
Yeah.
And hope that they would stop. But anyway, about that time we realized that we heard that whoever it was trying to get through those trees, that they'd gotten through, and we could hear this truck coming to us fast, loud and fast. We thought, what in the world's going on? And we heard this guy, and man, he is sliding around, roaring down there on us. Thought, what in the world? And he came busting out on us, and it was an old beat up Dodge 4-wheel drive, all jacked up and everything, and it had with a Cummins diesel on it, and he had a one of the 4-inch exhausts on it and all that. And it was obviously he was running a chip. And the thing about it is, didn't have a tag on it. And the old boy in it was rough looking. And he had that look that, he didn't care what was going on, and that he was up to no good. So we decided we were just going to let him have it. So we got in the trucks and we left. That's what I think I talked to y'all earlier about it. We left, and we got back up there, and we got back across. We didn't have any trouble getting back across those tree trunks. And by the time we got across the tree trunks, we were thinking about, we thought he was just staying down there at the old boat ramp. We thought maybe he'd just come down and drink beer or something like that. And I don't know. And we realized here he came hot and fast. What we were fixing to do is we were getting chains and snatch straps out. We were going to pull those trees out of the road. Here he came, much faster coming out than he had come in. And so we got up there, and it had taken him quite a bit of effort to get across those tree trunks coming in. Dude, he hit those things hard and fast coming out. And we just got over, and he came flying past us, slinging gravel. And this is on a 1-lane road, and fortunately his truck was jacked up pretty high, and he had his left wheels off in the ditch. And I thought he was going to turn the thing over, really seriously. And he shot past us and managed to get it back up on the road. And son, he was gone. So I don't know if he was down there at that boat ramp when those boogers got there or what, but he came out of there a lot faster than he came in. So we let
That
him
happened.
go. I don't know. I'd like to know what happened. But that sort of messed up our night, and so we decided to come on home. By this time, it's it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, something like that. So we came on in. So that was our
well,
night last night.
well, it was really good seeing you
Yeah,
when you came up. And, I think about the guys that we already knew, like Troy and Maycheck and
yeah,
uh, Jimmy Osmer. For us,
yeah.
me and Larry has talked about this. That was our biggest treat of the weekend, was being able to meet Jimmy, because that's a mic dropper right there. He will say
Yeah,
something and then just walk away, and you're just dying laughing. He is a real
yeah.
treat. And
He was he was a trip to work with. I worked with him for about two
you
years,
know,
and you never knew what was going to come out of that boy.
and I think about being able to see Clint, your son, again. That was
Yeah,
great. And
yeah,
the guys that we were able to talk to and meet for the first time, I think about Austin. Uh, and I
yeah.
really enjoyed talking to Jack. Jack is really
Oh yeah,
knowledgeable. And
yeah. He is.
I really like talking to Jack. And I think back, you had carried a group of us to where the Beast of LBL happened. And
Right.
one we were basically wrapping up, and me,
Yeah.
you, and Jack and Clint
Mm-hmm.
had walked down into the holler, and
Mm-hmm.
Centuria had showed up late, and she has
Right.
uh, a cadaver dog, and
Yeah, I forgot about
she went off in those woods. And as we were walking back up the hill, she started hollering for us. And we went into the woods where she was at, and that
that. Right.
cadaver dog had alerted and was sitting beside the tree to
Yeah.
where the little girl was found up in that tree. And I just thought,
Right.
wow, she had, I mean, who could have picked out that tree like that? And
Right.
that was really eye opening for me.
Right. And then after it left the tree, she called off to and had it start looking again, and it went back up there. It went back up there and alerted where the camper had been sitting. And
Right.
that was that. I thought first time I thought just that was just chance. But
Yeah.
when it went up there and it alerted on where the camper had been sitting, and she was not there. She had not been in there.
Yeah.
She hadn't heard any of us
Right.
talking. She's going there totally blind. I'm like, holy moly. And,
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, we didn't get to do everything we wanted to do up there. We're still going to, do what we talked about. And you and I, that we all talked about, we're still going to do that. But we had too many people to do what we want
Right.
us to do. What you and I, what we had all talked about. But we're still going to do that. But yeah, it was a good trip. I was really glad we got to do all that. But seeing that cadaver dog work was astounding.
Yeah.
I can remember I was involved in the investigation of a woman that disappeared in Alabama, and they brought a cadaver dog out, and it had been months, since this woman had disappeared. And I thought, oh, that thing ain't gonna be able to do anything. And they said no, that they'll find them. It could be years and years later that if there's a cadaver, it's been there, and it's trained, to look for human cadavers, that they can detect that years and years and years later. And
Yeah, it's amazing.
I can remember that they I don't remember what there was a serial killer, mass murderer that had killed people all over the United States, that they discovered that he owned a piece of property up in Jackson County, Alabama. And they had went up there and they dug and looked all over that place and didn't find anything. And then a year or so passed, and they brought a cadaver dog up there and found a body. And it was a body that had been gone for a decade or more. I don't remember how long the body had been there. It'd been there a long, long, long time. And it was buried. I don't know how the guy got it down. It was buried down in a cleft down between two huge monolithic rocks, that made up the top of this mountain. And like I said, I don't know how the guy got the body down in there, but I mean, it was like 9, 10, 11 feet down. Wow. Underground. And this dog found it. And
wow.
Yeah. So those cadaver dogs are for real, if they've been properly trained. And that when that dog struck in that area there, just blind, hadn't had any direction from any of us.
Right.
They just came down there where we were, and boom, that was pretty eye-opening. Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I think we could go another 2 hours and not even hit the tip of the iceberg. And we would really like to have you back on sometime if you would be so gracious for us. And,
so crazy to do.
I said gracious. Gracious. Let me get that straight. And but we would like to give you this opportunity to end the show and just say whatever you would like to leave with our audience.
Well, any of you guys that are wanting to get into Bigfoot research, and I gave up decades ago trying to prove that they exist, because I know that they exist, and I know the government's not going to let anybody prove that they exist. The government will admit that they're here when they're good and ready, and anything that I do or any of us do is not going to change things. But my goal now in the field is just to educate people, and I've been working with a bunch of younger guys and stuff, and I've been writing on a book for years and years and years, but I've got a few rules and stuff that I do. And my number one thing I teach people that go out with me or that are wanting to go out in the woods is, I don't care if you're going Bigfoot hunting, or you're just going fishing, or you're going to a dove hunt, or you're going out camping, tent camping. The number one thing that you should always do when you park anywhere other than your driveway, and depending on where you live, you ought to do it in your own driveway, is you turn your vehicle around and you have that dude pointing the safe way out, so that you don't have, if something happens and you need to get out of there quick, open up an extra large can of Gone. You need to be able to jump in that vehicle and fire that dude up, throw it in gear and mash on the gas, and it's pointing on the way out of there. You don't want to have to be backing up and juking around and stuff to get out of there. And like I said, I don't care what you're doing. My dad taught me that from the time I was a little bitty kid. We'd be going out there just to grease the tractor sitting in the field, or to check on a cow, or to go bird hunting, or go check our beehives, whatever. before Daddy would shut the truck off, he'd turn that dude around and he'd have that dude pointed the safe way out, the fastest, safest way out of there, to get the heck out of there. And a lot of the places we go Bigfooting, there's one way in and one way out.
Yeah.
So you better turn your vehicle around and have that dude pointed on the way out. And that is rule A number 1. And do not ever fail. I failed myself one time. It cost me $700. It cost me a big old dent in the side of my F-250, where I had no idea that I was going to call a booger up there, but I did. And he popped out in the daylight, and he was mad. And I was by myself in the freaking middle of nowhere, and I decided it was time to, like I said, open up an extra large, super fast acting can of Gone and get out of there, because he popped up out of a draw about 25, 30 feet away from me. I jumped in my truck, and I was pulled into a stupid parking space in an old abandoned campground and an old abandoned picnic area. And I had to back up, and I had to juke that big old truck 3 or 4 times to get that thing turned around and get out of there. In the meantime, that dude found a tree limb about 5 feet long, 4 or 5 feet long, and about as big around as my arm, laying there on the ground. And he picked that dude up, and he ran. Just about the time I was making my last juke, backing up, he took that thing and he slung it sidearm like that. That thing goes, wham! Hit the passenger side of the bed of my truck. And I hadn't even made the first payment on that truck. I'd had that truck about 2 weeks.
Oh,
put a big old crease right over the top of the wheel well. And I ended up there with it. Used to be an outfit called Dent Doctors that was in a few areas there in the southeast. And I ended up calling up Dent Doctors, and they came up and used a vacuum deal and sucked that dent out of the side of my truck. And you could still see it, but they told me to park it out in the sun for that summer, and that it'd slowly work its way out. And it did. And after a couple of months or so, a couple of 3 months, you had to look hard to see it to tell it was ever there. But yeah, I can imagine. Here I've had the truck 2 weeks. I'm calling up the insurance company. Oh, I got a dent in the side of my truck. Well, what happened? I was out putting booger through a big limb up against the side of the truck. All that in. And I paid for that out of my pocket.
Yeah, that's a good way to get your insurance canceled real quick, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Larry, do you have any final words?
Oh, I just appreciate Coonbo coming on. We lost touch for a year or two, but we're going to get back out there and hit it again and see what we can get into. And
y'all mentioned, y'all had mentioned want me to tell a little story I told y'all about an adventure we'd had over near George Jones's house. I'll tell this one, but okay. George Jones and Tammy Wynette used to live had a nice place on Shoals Creek over here off of Wilson Lake on the Tennessee River. This is on the Lauderdale County, Alabama side of the river. And they had a nice place on Shoals Creek there for several years. And I've actually was in the place one time, years later, but I don't know if you call it a pyromaniac or whatever, but I grew up, we always had dynamite on the farm for blasting out stumps or blasting, fence post holes and stuff. And so I grew up around that stuff. And, we had star drills that we would, if we were trying to put fence posts in and it was, a lot of rock or whatever, these are the old drills that you see some in the old movies. You hold it in place. Somebody's got to hold it in place, and then somebody hits it with a sledgehammer or whatever, and then you turn it just a little bit, you hit it again, and you actually can drill holes in rock with those things. So or we had these big augers that we'd auger into a stump and auger a hole down under a stump, and they were just big around enough you'd slide a stick of dynamite or two or three, whatever, down underneath it, and with a blasting cap, one of them, and you'd set it off, blow the stump out of the ground, or you'd blow a hole in the rock, and, so you could set a fence post in. So I really enjoyed blowing up stuff, and and we'd go. I learned about mixing up diesel fuel and the right ratios to mix diesel fuel and a certain kind of fertilizer and make your own explosive, and how to set it off, and we'd play around with that. And I've seen we'd blow a hole in the ground big enough that you could in a field, where the water table was pretty high, it'd fill up with water, and we could duck hunt out there. And anyway, so I was sort of I don't know if you call it a pyromaniac or whatever as a kid. And when I was in the 9th grade, I learned how to make nitroglycerin. I learned the safe way of making it. I also had learned that if you didn't do it the safe way, that it'd get to a certain point, it would detonate by itself. So me and some of my buddies, and I had some friends that were just as bad as me, and we were all the time, we'd doing stuff like we would build pellets for our pellet rifles that would explode on impact, or we'd drill out a 22 rifle bullet and put stuff inside the side of it so it'd blow up when it hit something. And we were regular little hooligans. So we decided that got this wild hare, and this is before I knew where George Jones and Tammy Wynette lived. We had got this wild hare that we were going to take a wooden pallet, and there was a place where we could get to Shoals Creek that was upstream of where they lived. And like I said, we didn't know they lived down there. And we got this wooden pallet, and we got down there, we checked it out, and I think we put a little bit of something in it to help it float or something, or it would float good enough by itself. I don't remember. But anyway, I had liberated a couple of beakers and the right stuff to make nitroglycerin with, and a burette with a little valve on it that you could set to drip, drip, drip. So we got it all set up, and we paddled out with a canoe. We paddled out in the middle of Shoals Creek, and we put 2 of the ingredients in this beaker and the third ingredient in this burette, and started it dripping. And this was at this time of the year, this hot part of the year, and I knew that as that stuff combined, it was at that temperature, it was unstable. I knew that it when it get to a certain volume of it, that it would blow up. So we started it dripping, and sure enough, we saw the stuff start floating up, and so we set it adrift, and we paddled back into the shore, and we're sitting there, we're waiting. There's like 3 or 4 of us here, and waiting, and come on, it's gonna blow up. It's gonna blow up. It's gonna blow. And we figured it'd blow up and it'd be like 2 or 3 M80s or something. We played. I mean, we're idiots. We used to have slingshot battles and shoot M80s and cherry bombs at each other. We'd steal one of our friends. His uncle smoked cigars, and he'd steal us some of his cigars. We'd light those cigars, and we'd have our cherry bombs and M80s in our pockets and a slingshot, and we'd then we'd draw back, we'd light that M80 or cherry bomb with a slingshot, and then we'd shoot it at one of our buddies hiding down in the woods or down the street. Yeah, I mean, we were idiots. We wonder we didn't kill somebody. But anyway, so we're sitting there, we're waiting, and we're watching, and the thing kept drifting down the creek, and this creek moves pretty slow, and especially this time of the year, or that time of year we hadn't had a bunch of rain, so it's just slowly going in, and we're waiting. I'm like, well, dadgum, maybe it doesn't work. And it eventually went out of sight. And we're sitting there, we waited, and don't hear nothing, I think, well, crap. Well, what do we want to go to get? Nah, I ain't paddling all the way down to get that thing. And forget it, somebody will see it, their boat will turn it over, or it'll drift up in, whatever. So we decided to leave. So we got this old canoe and we picking it up, we're carrying it up the hillside. And about that time, from way off down the creek, plumb out, I thought we heard, boom, and it just echoed all up and down through that. Holy crap! We couldn't believe how loud it was. We found out later on that dude went off right down there near George Jones's house, and I think it was actually past his place, but it rattled windows all up and down that creek, and they were I think the sheriff's department came out there, and they were calling out, people were calling, somebody blew up something out there, and I think somebody saw something in the creek. I'm not sure, but we heard about it. It was the talk. You'd hear about people talking about it for quite a while, and I heard from somebody. I heard about it decades later, from I would say decades, years and years later, from somebody who lived near there, that it really shook that place up when it went off. And so some of my friends said, "You nearly blew up George Jones and Tammy one." I said, "Dude, we didn't know they lived down there." And it didn't go off right from their place, but it was pretty close. I don't know. I got no idea if they were home or not. No idea. But I hope they weren't. I'd hate to think I scared them. Scared to go. I met Tammy Wynette. She was just the nicest lady, and old George was just as regular old guy. He used to go grocery shopping at the Food World or Albertsons or something there nearby, and one of my buddies used to always sack his groceries and carry them out for him, and he just a regular guy. I used to live later on when he moved off Shoals Creek. He lived in the same neighborhood where I later lived, and I can still show you his house where he lived then, and that's where when he was living there is where he made his famous run where Tammy was trying to get him to quit going out buying beer, and she took all his car keys away from him. So he got on his John Deere riding mower and drove it up to the state line.
I've seen that video.
Yeah. That happened. Dude, if you went back and retraced his path where he went, it's amazing. That's a long way. Gotta give him credit, man. He wasn't going to be denied. He was tenacious.
What a go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we did some other stupid things along the river involving explosives and stuff, but I'm
Yeah, we don't want you to incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was go ahead.
What a great night this has been. And
yeah,
we want I know our audience is just eating this up and sitting up on their seat and listening to every word. And we just really want to thank you again for coming on, Coonbo. We appreciate you.
Yep, definitely.
Thank you for inviting me. And I feel honored that y'all let me be on this special show. This your 100th show. That's really pretty cool. I appreciate it. And I really am looking forward to us, doing some more of the stuff that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And upcoming things, and making a lot more stuff that we can report on. now that I'm retired, I've got a lot more time to get out in the woods. And like I said, I'm headed out here in a couple of days, going up to Illinois, and I'm gonna be going out to be making another trip out west in July.
Just don't ride a motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah.
Do what?
I said just don't ride a motorcycle.
Well, I am. I'm gonna be on my motorcycle. I'm gonna take it out there with me because I want to get back in some of these places I can't drive to.
Yeah.
And I rode all over the back country of Utah last year, and Utah and Colorado, and back in places you can not go in. You can go in a helicopter, or you can go on foot, or you can ride horseback, or you can ride a off-road bike. Motorcycle back in there. And I'm not talking about 10, 15 miles. I mean, we were 70, 80 miles back in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
I mean, nowhere.
We'll have to get you
got
back
there
on
last year.
Tell that story.
Yeah.
What's that?
We'll have to get you back on to tell that story.
Yeah. I had a pretty wild time back there last year.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I'm going. We're going up in the Dakotas, and I may get over into Montana and stuff this here in about a month.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna be hunting up those old Dakota boogers.
Yeah.
I know there's some in there. If they're there, I'll find them.
I know you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And again, thank you so much, Coonbo, for coming on. It's been an honor. It really has. And y'all be looking to have Coonbo on here again.
Yep.
And
it's on here again soon.
Because we had even started on the stories yet. And it's always a joy. And I feel sorry for those that hasn't ever been able to share a campfire with Coonbo, because it's good times with good friends. Yep. And with that, we would like to tell everybody we will be back same time next week. Be looking for me and Larry on Beast of the Woods on Monday nights at 8:00. And we will see y'all again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, footers.
We'll see you.
Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new Facebook members. Be sure to check out our pictures and videos of possible evidence. And if you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. If you would like to support Beast TV, check out our gear. We have coffee mugs, face masks, gaiters, shirts, and tank tops. The link is pinned at the top of the comment section. Everything is always marked down 20%. So come check out our junk. We want to thank all of our new subscribers and our faithful followers. Also, be sure to check out our field evidence videos and our sister channel, Beast of the Woods. That's Larry's channel. If you want to help us out, make sure that you are subscribed. Click the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again to each of you for watching, and we will see you again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, footers.
This has been a Sawdust production.